Welcome to this explainer. Everyone talks about that beautiful, unique bond we share with our cats. We absolutely love it when they curl up in our laps, follow us from room to room, and just show us love in their own quiet way, right? It's literally one of the most special relationships out there in the animal kingdom. But today, we need to pivot. We're going to dive into a pretty unspoken reality. We need to talk about what happens when that profound connection actually goes wrong. What happens when that attachment stops being beautiful and instead becomes a trap your cat simply cannot escape from?
I want to disrupt your preconceived notions for just a second. Ask yourself, is it love or is it anxiety? We so often look at a super clingy cat and just assume, oh, look at that pure, adorable devotion. But we really have to ask ourselves if what we're actually seeing is a sign of inescapable suffering. Today, we're exploring a side of cat ownership that honestly, most people never see coming. And the tricky part, it starts with behavior that looks exactly like love. Let's dive in.
Section 1. When love becomes a trap, the environmental mismatch. So, the very first core concept we really need to grasp here is that our modern homes, as incredibly safe and comfortable as they are for us, are completely mismatched with how feline brains are actually neurologically wired to function.
It all comes down to a really stark environmental contrast. Think about it. In a wild environment, even a totally solitary cat is experiencing constant, nonstop stimulation. They're tracking prey, they're patrolling their territory, they're processing just endless sounds and smells. Their minds are going a mile a minute every single hour of the day. Now, contrast that with the modern home. For a cat, an environment with zero stimulation and lots of empty space, that's basically sensory deprivation. And when a cat experiences that, they have to redirect all of that pent-up energy, all that social and emotional need, right onto the only living thing available to them. And well, that's you.
Which brings us to an absolutely critical concept: hyper-attachment. This happens when a cat's entire emotional world, literally, collapses into one single person. You stop being just their companion and you become their one and only coping mechanism. So the crucial takeaway here is this. The problem isn't that your cat loves you. The problem is when you become the absolute only barrier between your cat and a complete psychological collapse.
Moving on to Section 2, the 4 dark patterns, diagnosing the distress, we're going to look at 4 very distinct patterns that are massive red flags, indicating a bond has crossed the line from healthy love into full-blown hyperattachment. Pattern 1 is what experts call the shadow cat. You know the type. This is the cat that follows their owner into literally every single room, every moment of the day, without any rest. They just cannot settle down unless you are physically right there, visible to them. Now, to an outside observer, sure, this looks like pure, adorable devotion, but we've got to reframe this right now. Underneath that cute surface, this cat is actually in a state of chronic low-level anxiety. Their nervous system never, ever fully deactivates. They are just constantly on high alert, waiting for your next movement. And honestly, that sustained state of alert, it takes a massive physical toll. We're talking about really serious hidden consequences here. Things like chronic digestive problems, a weakened immune system, and even compulsive over-grooming. This is exactly why we have to stop looking at the shadow cat as just some quirky, clingy personality trait. It's actually a form of quiet suffering that literally breaks down the cat's physical body over time. Okay, pattern 2 is incredibly easy to misunderstand. We call this one the vocal hostage. This is the cat that starts exhibiting excessive distress vocalization, so crying, wailing, yowling, the precise second you step out of their sight. Now, a lot of owners mistake this for just a naturally talkative personality. Or, they think the cat is just bored or maybe begging for food. But make no mistake here, this is a real distress vocalization. What you're hearing is an actual mild panic response to separation. And the gravity of this specific vocal pattern is just immense. See, repeated panic responses like this actually permanently rewire the cat's stress baseline, pushing it constantly upward. Think about it. Over months and years of this happening, every single time you just walk into the kitchen or the bathroom, their brain physically changes. Their threshold for anxiety gets lower and lower and lower, until eventually almost anything triggers a fear response. So if your cat screams when you leave the room, I promise you they aren't just being chatty. They are desperately trying to tell you that their nervous system is not okay. Pattern 3 is what we call the destructive spiral. This is the cat that completely destroys the couch, knocks your favorite objects off tables, or literally scratches at the walls, but specifically when you, the owner, are absent.
Look, I get it. This is an incredibly frustrating behavior to deal with, but unfortunately, it almost always leads to a terrible misunderstanding of what the cat is actually going through in that moment. See, there's a massive disconnect here. Our human assumption is usually that the cat is acting out, misbehaving, or, just being spiteful because we left. But here's the thing. Spite requires premeditation, and cats simply do not possess that capability. The feline reality is completely different. The actual physical act of scratching and destroying things, it releases cortisol, stress hormones that have been intensely building up while you were gone. It's a desperate coping mechanism for unbearable anxiety. And worse, if you come home and punish the cat for that destruction, well, now the cat fears the separation and they fear your return. The cycle just deepens and deepens.
Which brings us to pattern 4. And honestly, this is the darkest pattern of them all, the physical manifestation. This happens when this chronic attachment anxiety stops being just a psychological issue and actually morphs into severe diagnosable physical illnesses. The emotional pain becomes so intense, so overwhelming that it quite literally breaks the cat's physical body.
We're talking about specific medical conditions that vets see constantly. Things like cystitis, which is a severe bladder inflammation with absolutely no bacterial cause, triggered entirely by psychological stress. Or psychogenic alopecia, which is a fancy way of saying the cat grooms themselves so frantically out of stress that they literally create bald patches all over their body. And stress colitis, chronic digestive inflammation linked directly back to an anxious mind. The tragedy here is that vets often treat these physical symptoms, but the psychological root cause, it goes entirely unaddressed. I want to let the gravity of this reality sink in for just a moment. Your cat is not just sick. Your cat is basically heartbroken on a neurological level. Their silent internal suffering has become so incredibly loud that their physical body is now paying the ultimate price. So how does this even happen? Section 3, Accidental Causes, How We Unknowingly Create Anxiety. First off, I want to assure you right now, nobody, and I mean nobody, creates this intentionally. But truly understanding our own role in this dynamic is absolutely the crucial first step to fixing it. There are quite a few accidental triggers we really need to be aware of. For example, carrying kittens around constantly during their early weeks. It feels loving, but it never allows them to develop independent exploration. Or responding to every single meow or vocalization. That actually teaches them on a neurological level that distress equals you appearing, which means they stay in distress to keep you around. Then there's inconsistent availability, like suddenly returning to the office after a couple years of working from home. That removes their entire emotional framework overnight. Also, single pet households mean 100% of their social needs fall entirely on your shoulders. And honestly, sometimes unconscious emotional projection plays a big role. If we're feeling lonely, we might actually unconsciously reward our cat's clingy behavior simply because, well, it feels really good to be needed.
But there is definitely hope. Let's move to Section 4, How to Walk It Back, Healing the Bond. This is the empowering part of the explainer. If your cat is exhibiting any of these dark patterns, you absolutely have the power to change their reality. Here is a very concrete 3-step treatment plan. Step 1 is graduated alone time. Think of this as basically exposure therapy, but for cats. You start super small, literally just 2 minutes of separation, you reward their calm behavior, and then you gradually extend that time over several weeks. What this does is gently teach their nervous system that, hey, separation is completely survivable, and more importantly, that you always come back. Step 2 is environmental enrichment. This is all about taking that intense stimulation hunger and redirecting it away from you and onto their surroundings. We're talking about setting up puzzle feeders, installing window perches, or even just placing a bird feeder right outside their favorite window. It's like kitty TV. And look, while it's definitely not the answer for absolutely everyone, bringing in a compatible feline companion can dramatically redistribute that emotional dependency. 2 cats sharing a space actually create their own little social ecosystem. It means you are, obviously, still super important to them, but you are no longer their entire universe. But perhaps the most counterintuitive part of this whole plan is Step 3, scheduled interaction. Usually we operate on what's called a demand response. Basically, you give them attention every single time they cry for it. But doing that actually creates this unpredictable environment that just breeds more anxiety. On the flip side, scheduled interaction teaches the cat that your attention comes reliably but on your terms. Once they learn that your attention is actually a reliable resource they can count on, they realize they don't need to panic just to get access to you. It turns out reliability is incredibly powerful at reducing feline anxiety. Now, I need to lay down a stern but absolutely vital rule here. Never punish distress behaviors. Seriously. Using punishment while a cat is in a state of high anxiety is only going to overwhelm them further and completely deepen the trauma. Remember, your cat isn't being bad. They are just totally overwhelmed. You have to focus on redirecting them, enriching their environment, and actually addressing the root cause of their anxiety. As we start to wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this one thought. The cats that suffer most are the deeply loved ones, whose entire world became one single person. If anything we've discussed today sounds a little too familiar, I want you to take a breath and replace any guilt you might be feeling right now with empowerment. This entire issue, it stems from a place of profound love. And now that you're armed with this actionable information, you have the power to step up, heal that bond, and bring some much-needed balance back into your cat's life.
Truly knowing what to look for is where everything changes for the better. I want you to really think about all these hidden behavioral patterns we've explored today. So, I'll leave you with this final question. Did you recognize any of these patterns in your own cat?